Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. I decided to break this into a 3-part series, and in this series I'm going to be focusing on the Katherine of Aragon, King Henry's first wife, and his second wife, Anne Boleyn, who is most famous for causing the Protestant Reformation. If you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and leave comments in the comment section down below for suggestions for further videos. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So King Henry is probably one of the most famous kings in England's history because he started the Protestant Reformation in the church, and he's also known for having 6 wives, all of which met various endings through either beheadings, divorce, or dying in childbirth. But right now I'll be focusing on his first wife, which was the Katherine of Aragon. So the Katherine of Aragon was the daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. She was originally betrothed and married King Henry's older brother named Arthur. Unfortunately, Arthur died soon after taking the throne, and so King Henry ended up taking his place. King Henry's father wanted to keep the strong alliance between England and Spain, and so he decided to marry King Henry off to the Katherine of Aragon. And so a few weeks after he started his reign in 1509, King Henry formally married the Katherine of Aragon in a royal ceremony. So she's thought to be the only wife out of the 6 that King Henry had that he ever truly loved, but one of the biggest misfortunes is that she was not able to bear King Henry a male heir, and this was really important because prior to his reign, his father had fought in a long war to basically gain control of the throne, and so back then it was preferred that males took over the country following the death of their fathers because it would stop a lot of the conflict and the turmoil. And so King Henry became obsessed with having a male heir, and unfortunately Katherine of Aragon was only able to give him a daughter named Mary. Fortunately, this caused the Katherine of Aragon great distress as she was unable to give King Henry a male heir. In the year of 1519, King Henry took on one of his most famous mistresses named Emily Blunt, and during this affair she actually gave the king his first half-son, and this is important because it allowed Henry to believe that it was not his fault that he was unable to have a male heir, but that it was the fault of Katherine of Aragon. And so during this time period, King Henry's eyes really began to wander because he began to realize that Katherine of Aragon was the problem, and that if he wanted to have a male heir, he needed to find an alternative wife that would give him a legitimate heir to the throne. During the 1520s, King Henry's eyes began to wander towards one of Katherine of Aragon's ladies-in-waiting called Anne Boleyn. And so, as you know, Anne Boleyn ended up being the second wife of King Henry. However, during that period of time, King Henry did not have the grounds to divorce the Katherine of Aragon, as he could not get an official annulment from the Pope. As a result, King Henry began to start the plans to basically break away from the church so that he would be named both head of the state and head of the church and grant himself his own annulment so that he could break his marriage with the Katherine of Aragon. So this was a major deal at the time because it was highly unusual for anyone to get a divorce, but it was also highly unusual for royalty to get a divorce because oftentimes marriages brought forth alliances and King Henry was very persistent for a male heir. At first, he decided to petition the church for an annulment of his marriage on the grounds that Katherine of Aragon had consummated her marriage with his brother, therefore he was unable to have a legitimate male heir. However, the church argued that because he was able to have a legitimate daughter, Princess Mary, that this was not correct. So King Henry basically went over the church, made himself head of both the state and the church, and granted himself his own annulment. Unfortunately, although the Katherine of Aragon was granted some form of an attorney or legal support, she ultimately lost the case and was forced to be formally known as the Dowager Princess and lost her title as queen. Also, King Henry decided to change the line of succession to make sure that any of the children that Lady Anne Boleyn had would be legitimate heirs to the throne. After completing the Reformation, King Henry was able to establish the Church of England and banish the Katherine of Aragon from court. Unfortunately, she passed away alone and without her title as queen in the year of 1536. Her daughter Mary was given royal status. However, she was no longer to be referred to as Princess Mary, but only as a private person, formerly known as Lady Mary. And now on to Anne Boleyn. King Henry's most famous wife. Anne Boleyn was married to the King Henry from the years of 1501 to 1536 and is by far one of his most prolific wife. Something that I found particularly interesting about Anne Boleyn is that King Henry had a relationship with Anne Boleyn's sister Mary prior to the relationship. And although Mary did not have any illegitimate children during this relationship, I still think it's interesting how King Henry had an affair with Mary Boleyn and then actually ended up marrying her sister Anne Boleyn some years later. So Anne Boleyn is known to be the most famous wife of King Henry because she's the one that really encouraged him to basically create the Church of England because he couldn't get an annulment underneath the church. And so across England, she didn't have the best reputation. She was often referred to as let's just say inappropriate terms across the country, and a lot of the people didn't really accept her because they had seen her as simply someone who rose to power and took it away from the Katherine of Aragon, who was considered to be wholesome, wise, kind, and generous. However, Anne Boleyn in her own right did make a huge influence during her time as queen. In their marriage, King Henry was very infatuated with Anne Boleyn because he thought that she would be the one to give him a male heir. And once they were wed in 1533, Anne fell pregnant. Some say that she was already pregnant during her wedding or that she fell pregnant soon after. And King Henry was convinced that she was going to give birth to his male son. However, Anne actually ended up giving birth to Queen Elizabeth, who ironically became one of the most influential and best leaders in England's history. Unfortunately, this is not what King Henry wanted, and after a few more years, he eventually lost interest in Anne Boleyn and took on several mistresses. One of them being Jane Seymour, who was actually a cousin to Anne Boleyn and ended up being the next queen. Basically, King Henry tired of Anne Boleyn after several miscarriages and stillborn births and came to the conclusion that she would never give him a male heir. However, he couldn't divorce her on the grounds of simply her not being able to give him a son. As a result, he alleged that Anne Boleyn had been unfaithful during their marriage and that she hadn't been a virgin when they got married. He got people who were part of his court basically to fabricate stories that Anne Boleyn had had an affair on the king, and as a result, she was locked up and jailed. Eventually, King Henry was able to get her beheaded, and I think from my research, he got married either the same day or a few days after to Jane Seymour once he beheaded Anne Boleyn. And once again, King Henry was focused on getting a male heir, and so he believed that Jane Seymour would be the answer. And poor Anne Boleyn was beheaded. But if you guys liked the video, go ahead and hit the subscribe and like button down below, and please leave me comments about what you guys would like to see next. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!